and she's been working on a book that should be out within the coming year that results out of her research and study in so many areas, but in part out of a series of Poetry Center programs. Yeah. So Eleni's an amazing poet and friend, and really glad that she wanted to introduce Phoebe today. So Eleni Stecopoulos.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Elise. It's great to be back at the Poetry Center. It's a great honor and pleasure to introduce my friend, Phoebe Giannisi. When I was thinking about Phoebe's work, just take her books out here. So the first time that I saw Phoebe perform here in San Francisco, she was wearing this fabulous reading device, which was sort of like this minimalist corset or dress, but it unfurled from her body as a lectern, a podium, and it was designed and constructed out of silicone. And she calls this the by heart apparatus, and she tells me today that it's a joke, because when you speak from the heart, right, or when you learn something by heart, you don't have to read it. And here she was reading from this exoskeleton that came out of her body. So this is my first clue that she's something of a trickster, because this sort of functional couture, this artifice that she was wearing, really only called attention to the fact that her authority, that she already embodied authority. She didn't need some prosthetic or some other device. But this device that she was wearing also gave her the aura of some other being, maybe a cicada or an ancient Greek tetikes, which is one of several key animal poet figures for Phoebe, a being who sheds its body and spills its voice in the earth, singing all summer. So Phoebe is an architect in addition to being a poet. She's a scholar of ancient Greek poetry and poetics. She's a sound, performance, and installation artist. Among the many forms that she works in, she writes poem essays. She writes what she calls embodied philology. She gives performances that incorporate lectures and insist on lecturing, reading, as a physical, visceral, sensuous response to the outside. Reading poetry for Phoebe often means collaboration with other voices, including extra-human voices, and involves the transformation of her body. The second time I saw her perform, she was wearing another reading device. This was a parchment made from the hide of a young female goat. She calls it her aegis. She says it's my mask, my shield. This goat shield is a parchment. And so on one side, Phoebe had her poem. On the other side, a map of Greece, scored by the lines made by goats on their migration routes as they're being herded by shepherds who make the seasonal journeys between the lowlands and the highlands of Greece. So Phoebe followed these shepherds. These are Vlach people who are an ethnic minority in Greece who faced discrimination. They speak a language that is endangered, but they still have this way of life where they practice what's called transhumance with their goats. And so Phoebe connects the goats that are like a sacred economy. There's a reciprocity between the shepherds. And there are many products that come from the goats. And so she connects the goats that give the economy to shepherds with the goat song of tragedy and the question of the land. And then I saw Phoebe turn into a goat, adorning herself with bells, dancing and shearing her own hair, saying, "I will speak to you as a chimera, a mythic species, a she-goat human cross." In this performance work, a precursor to her extraordinary book, Chimera, or Chimera in English, she works in many different voices, so from poets, travelers, ethnographers, voices of the goats, voices of shepherds, along with many writers. What she's doing here is very interesting because she's taking a very well-known form, the form of tragedy, but she's excavating it, and she's doing something radical with it because she's going to its roots, because tragedy, the etymology, means the song of the he-goat. But Phoebe changes it, so it's the song of the she-goat, and the word for the she-goat is also the same root as the sea, the Aegean Sea that surrounds Greece, and that is the topos, the landscape of Greece. Phoebe gives us a different theory of tragedy. Rather than the development of law and order, for her, tragedy is a discourse of the other, of the one who is sacrificed, or the one who sacrifices, like Antigone, who broke the king's law by dusting the body, burying the body of her outlaw brother. And so in this right to the earth and land, tragedy, the song, becomes, again, a song of the land rather than fictions of law and nature and nation. Phoebe is also a bit like another of her personae and avatars, the goddess Thetis, whose name means she who is placed, or she who places, establishes, lays the foundation. Sometimes identified also with Metis, who's a trickster. And this goddess changed form, right? So she tries to escape from the mortal who rapes her and devours her, right, by changing form, but he holds her fast. And so the metamorphosis that runs through Phoebe's work is very interesting because on the one hand it's this great power and you have to be other to speak. But on the other hand, it can also, the transformation can be an escape, and yet women can also be held captive. So there are many metamorphoses and many figures. Thetis, who becomes a cuttlefish. Aidon, the myth of the mother who accidentally kills her son, and then in her grief turns into a nightingale who sings. Each line of Phoebe's thought is so fully elaborated in physical and aesthetic forms. So the parchment, the aegis, the goat skin, the bells, but also the poem, the soundscape. And everything is fully elaborated in many translated forms because thought is embodied for her. The physical and sensuous are the basis for thought and speech. She has this way of bringing out the dynamic that's in the words and even the letters. Greek is a very plastic, poetic language. It's very sensitive with many declensions. And for me, Phoebe enacts the vitality of the words that they live in Greek, right? So tragedy or ecology. And these are brought alive as practice. Song is path. Maps can be sung. Even the gorgeous design of her books, you can see, for instance, the emblem of the lyre, like the ancient instrument, and its correspondence with the letter C. You can see the emblem of the aegis, the parchment, which is something that Phoebe wears in performance and also reads. So she's really drawing out the textuality and the weaving that's in all of these different forms and the mutual poesis, creation of maps, lines of songs, weaving and dreaming. This book is called Rhapsodia, and Phoebe is like the ancient rhapsode, right, who stitches together many different parts, right, the way that the Homeric poems were composed. So as a rhapsode, someone who knits, who weaves, your song is made of many elements, many threads, many different patches. So it's a collective creation. Phoebe says the following in an interview, which I love. Opitis ena on, που μεταμορφώνεται για να μπορέσει να τραγουδήσει, να μιλήσει στους άλλους, για τους άλλους και το άλλο. The poet, a being who undergoes metamorphosis in order to sing, to speak to others, about others, and the other. So like the cicada, right, that sheds its body, what if pouring your voice out means shedding your old body. You're shedding your old voice, your previous voice. You can't have the singing and the desire without the dirt and the shed skin and the rapacious desire and to take in language and metabolize it into your song. For me, Phoebe Giannisi is an artist who's willing to be changed, who knows that to speak, we have to become other. We become other. Speaking only happens in an embodied way. And for me, she's a model of ethnography, right? That curious part of cultural anthropology that at its best is dialogic, right? And that is a polyphonic composition. But for me, she models ethnography because she's tracking and listening to culture made by all beings. Those voices have always been extra-human. Animals also make our culture. And so to be an ethnographer, you have to be like an ecographer. Right? So it's not so much writing our common home, but it's who does the land belong to. And unlike the ancient Athenians, who said that they were born from the earth and took this to be something exclusive, for me, Phoebe changes this radically. Because for her, the ecos of ecology, belongs to everyone who moves on this earth, right? Everyone who subsists on it, the shepherds, the goats, the migrants who cross the Aegean and who cross the land. So for me, what she's doing is really an eco-poetics for the future, which is chthonic and also speculative. Phoebe is the author of 8 books of poetry in Greek, 2 translated into English by Brian Sneeden. She is professor of architecture at the University of Thessaly. She's also a classicist and has contributed to several group shows and also solo exhibitions in installation, video, and sound. Please welcome Phoebe Giannisi.
Eleni, thank you so much. Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Susan, also, and Elise, for making me come here and be with you. And thank you, everybody that is here tonight. No, it's not tonight. So, my presentation, my reading has 2 parts. The first is a modular poem I wrote, and has to do with the sea. Please tell me if you can hear me, because I feel like... Okay. Is the micro okay also?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. The music of the sea. Sea chorus. 1. The music of the sea. 2. The music of the sea, always the same, constantly different. 3. The music of the sea, or perhaps the music of the wind on the sea. Ο άνεμος μουσικός, η θάλασσα το όργανο, όνομα αρσενικό, όνομα θηλυκό, όνομα ουδέτερο. 4. Ω αμάραντο πέλαγος, τι ψιθυρίζεις, πες μου, από νωρίς είμαι στο πρωινό σου στόμα. 5. In the long dive, στο μακροβούτι. 6. The sea bottom, bathed in the light of dreams. 7. Such an appetite I have for the sea, the peasant woman said, and in she went. 8. A tourist in Crete sued the hotel because she has been disturbed by an unfathomable noise that lasted all day long. 9. Hey you, cicadas, my messengers. Hey, Gigi, chiamangeli. 10. Angeli των μουσών. You do not visit my home. 11. But there are no cicadas to be heard. A neighborhood without cicadas. 12. The Eskimos sing the whale song. 13. The breams sing too, for the females, to hear them. Τραγουδούν κι σπάρι για να τους ακούν οι θηλυκές. Today on the beach. Ευτυχία first sunbath, then she swam, then she did exercises. I went in the morning and got to the corner. Southeasterly wind of 2 or 3 before. Vicky held the towel spread for her brother to place in it his paraplegic son who bathed while being held. His father wet the kid's head, holding him like a babe on a floating chair. Zeffie and Vangelis played backgammon. Nick the alcoholic walked his little dog on a leash. He sat down for a chipuro, maybe a coffee, at the neighbors nearby. Table out on the street by the sea and eucalyptus trees overhead. Antonis and Vangelis played backgammon. From behind the invalid called out to Maria. Get me out of here. And what makes you think I can lift you? Maria's answered. Vicky asked me what that stationary ship might be. I know it's been stationed before us for some weeks. It has unloaded weapon systems for the NATO bases. And now, what might the ship be waiting for? A. It's waiting for time to be over. B. It's waiting. 3. C. It's waiting to re-unload. D. It left for 2 days to exit the territorial waters, renew its entry permit, and came back in. E. Slowly it will turn to stone. Poseidon turned stone the actions and closed off the entrance to the harbor. 14. Μαρμάρωσε ο Ποσειδώνας το καράβι των Φεάκων και έκλεισε του λιμανιού την μπούκα. 15. Stone ship, πετροκάραβο. 16. Stone fish, πετρόψαρα. 17. Stone Island, does it exist? Πετρονήσι. 18. It was turned into stone and lost my voice. I was turned into stone and lost my voice. 19. The islands are ships turned to stone. They come in all sizes. 20. Μαρμαρωμένο αρχιπέλαγος. An archipelago turned to stone. 21. Greek marmaros, marble. That which shines. 22. Verb marmerin, marmero, origin. The early Indo-European mer, to sparkle, glimmer, gleam, to sparkle. 23. The striped sea bream in Greek is called murmura, και η μουρμούρα ψάρι θαλάσσιο. 24. From the verb mormiro, to murmur, to splosh, because the sea bream makes sound as it moves along. 25. Thymena Island. The locals call it Phimena. Thymos, ancient Greek, soul, spirit, breath, desire. Thymus, Indo-European, early dhymos, smoke. 26. The islands puffing away, το νησί φουμάρει. 27. Το νησί θύμωσε, the island is angry. 28. The island with the theme, bashes, το νησί με τα θυμάρια. 29. The place is redolent, μυρίζει ο τόπος. 31. The word for island in Greek, nissos, comes from the same root as the word for ship, naphs. 32. Hence the islands turn to stone, because by definition islands float like ships until a god brings them down, ethymos. 33. Delos. 34. And yet islands we are always sailing, pulled along by the wind, no matter how still you are inside the whirlwind. 35. At the heart of the tornado, many hearts, many swirls upon the sea. 36. Like a donkey's back from a distance, she said. 37. Cloud-crowned, said Archilochus. Let me just Google that. 38. Έστηκεν ύλης αγρής επιστεφής. It stood crowned by wild woods. The ceremony that the island was Tassos. 39. To swim or to ride? To swim. 40. To swim or to work? To swim. 42. Always late for class and dripping wet. 43. Naps, ship. From now, to swim. 44. Ship equals island equals that which seems equals me. 45. Stone ship equals myself long ago. Ship turned to stone. 46. Blooms of the stone, Seferis, Antitis Petras. 47. Inside the sea caves there is a craving, there is a love, Seferis. Μέσα στις θαλασσινές πηγές υπάρχει μια δίψα, υπάρχει μια αγάπη, υπάρχει μια έκσταση. 48. At the far end of the sea cave, the faces are lit by an otherworldly light. A bat took flight. 49. Τα παιχνίδια του νερού στο ταβάνι. The water's playful refractions on the ceiling. 51. Without a mask, visions blurs. We need to develop a vision that doesn't blur in the water. We used to be fish of old. 52. For whole days I was looking at you. For whole days I was looking in your eyes, and I didn't recognize you. Sung to music by Mikis. Μέρες ολόκληρες σε κοίταζα, μέρες ολόκληρες σε κοίταζα στα μάτια και δεν σε γνώριζα. 53. Seferis tense is past, now and forever is elitis. 54. What I know through love. 55. And the things I know through anger, I want to forget. Sink them into non-existence. Dank. 46. Να μην ξεχάσω. Το ρόθο, το μουρμούρισμα, το παφλασμό, το χτύπο, το φλίσμο στα βράχια, το γουγλούκισμα, το ψήθυρο του κύματος, το βογγητό, το βρυχυθμό και την κλαγκή των όπλων. Φωνάζουμε εκεί που σκάει, να μην ξεχάσω την ηχό. Not to forget. The roaring, the murmuring, the splashing, the slapping, the bubbling against the rocks, the sloshing, the waves whispering, the groaning, the roaring, and the clanging on the arms. We call out where it breaks. Not to forget. The reverberation echo. 47. Not to forget the names. Να μην ξεχάσω τα ονόματα. 48. Να μην ξεχάσω την τρανή χαρά στα μάτια δάκρυα φέρνει. Not to forget the glorious joy that makes a sob rise up in me. 49. Not to forget the glorious joy. It brings tears in my eyes. 50. And the spasm. 51. And on the island the lively goats. Τα ζωηρά κατσίκια. 52. Ζωηρά. Μες στη ζωή, μέσα, κατάμεσα. Lively, in the middle of life, in its dead center. 53. Not to forget the seaweed and the grasses of the sea. 54. And those jellyfish, invisible in the water. And the medusas. 55. In the sea cave, you turned around to look at me, Orpheus. 55. You turned your head, and I evaporated like smoke at the entrance to Hades. 56. Entrance to Hades, as he looked into her eyes and did not recognize her. 57. Κάθε πότε το παρόν είναι παρόν. Every how often is the present present. 58. 58. Every how often does the egg break and we are released to the outside? 59. We need to develop a vision clear at the bottom of the sea. We need to develop a sense of hearing clear at the bottom of the sea. 60. When will we hear the whale song? 61. On a recording on YouTube. 62. We also heard whole schools of male fish singing at dawn and at dusk to all those mute females. 63. Basho certainly says as much about the cicadas. 64. It's not only among mammals that females sing, is it now? 65. Among the birds, mute. Among the insects, mute. Among the fish, mute. 66. And the writer in his book classifies singing as part of the sexual organs. 67. But among whales and dolphins, do the females sing? Or do they just chatter? 68. And who determines what is singing and what mere speech? It takes an ear that can tell the difference. And who has that? 69. What's all this prose writing? 70. A. I am trying to understand whether poetry can be at home everywhere. 71. B. I can no longer be artish. 72. Read this and set up a grave for me on the Hellespont so that those passing call my name. For as long as it is heard, I am still alive. 72. By the sea, a pin or two, who crashed down the stairs by the sea, nevertheless, with his all, the beautiful you. 73. A stone set up on the ground, a stone upon the stone, with its roots in the water. 74. The cenotaphs, τα κενοτάφια of those drowned. 75. Yet from the depths the drowned beckon you. 76. Not to forget. The wailing, the innards swollen by the sea salt, the eyes swollen by all the weeping, the swelling of Archilokos, 77. Να μην ξεχάσω τον γο. 79. Πολυφλής βιό, θαλάσσις κύμα. 80. Οι δαλέους δαμφοδίνης έρχομεν πνεύμονας. 82. Κλείτε γυναικείων πένθος αποσάμενοι μην. Get a hold on yourselves. 83. Or, do not mourn your death as if you were women. 84. Or else, leave this call to the women. You are meant for other things. 85. Lungs swollen from all the weeping, from the salty water, like those who were drowned. 87. I forgot to mention that everyone sits out in the street. 88. With the tables and the plastic chairs under the shade of the trees, mulberry and eucalyptuses. 90. Possible scripts of the sea chart. Recipes. What I cooked today. What I cooked yesterday. What tomorrow. All ingredients in the diminutive. Βάνεις πατατούλες, κρεμμυδάκι, λαδάκι, ντοματούλα, σκορδάκι. You put in potatoes, silvers of onion, drop of oil, some blessed tomatoes, a touch of garlic. Not to forget to mention the factory. 95. Not to forget the shipwrecks again. 96. I also surmise that today took place or will take place tomorrow. 97. A great cormorant ascended to heavens. So I stop here.
Take a second to pull down the shelves.
As you understand, this is a poem that goes like that with numbers, and each number is a kind of introduction to something else, and this is a kind kind of liberty that permits the one who writes and the one who thinks through writing to incorporate several kinds of languages and voices inside one thing, that is the poem.
Should we start the video?
Yes.
Wake up the video.
Εισαγωγή. Μικρή, δεν καταλάβαινα γιατί με παροιμίες απαντούσε η μαμά ή με στιχάκια και έλεγε το τραγούδι ολόκληρο μετά. Τώρα το κάνω κι εγώ, αλλά ακόμα δεν ξέρω το γιατί. Θέτης. Για την θέτιδα μου είναι πιο εύκολο να μιλήσω. Θεά πουλή, θεά υγρή, θεά ηχθή, θεά ρευστή, θεά σουπιά πριν σκλαβωθεί, θεά λιγνή, βούλιαζε τα καράβια των Περσών πάνω στις πέτρες. Έπειτα παραδόθηκε σε ένα θνητό και έκανε παιδί, θνητό κι αυτό. Όλες οι μάνες γεννούν θνητά παιδιά. Από εκεί αρχίζει η ιστορία μας. Όλων των γυναικών μητρών. Θέτης και Παναγιά. Θέτης θεά γεννά θνητό, που θα πεθάνει. Και Παναγιά θνητή, γεννά Θεό, που θα αναστηθεί. 2. Ας ξαναρχίσω από την αρχή. Θέτης, Παναγία, 1-0. Σήμερα εορτάζεται ο θάνατος της Παναγίας. Ο θάνατος της Θέτιδος δεν αναφέρεται, αφού ήταν θεά και είναι θεά. Από μια μίξα, είπε η καλόγρια, συγγνώμη που τα λέω αυτά. Από μια μίξα του ανδρόγυνου γίνεται ένας ολόκληρος άνθρωπος. Αυτό δεν είναι θαύμα? Άλλη εκδοχή. Όταν κουβαλάς ένα παιδί στην κοιλιά, κουβαλάς ολόκληρο τον κόσμο. 5. Αρχίζω από την αρχή για να μην φτάσω στο τέλος. Όταν κουβαλάς ένα παιδί, είσαι αναγκασμένη να το βγάλεις έξω. Όταν έρθει η στιγμή πρέπει να σπρώξεις, να το σπρώξεις έξω με όλη τη δύναμη της κοιλιάς που το κρατούσε μέσα. Σπρώξε. Τώρα. 10. Αυτό λίγο πιο πριν. Αυτό ήθελε να υπάρξει. Κίνησε να υπάρξει. Η στιγμή της έναρξης ήταν η βούλησή του να υπάρξει. Βούληση για ζωή ή για θάνατο. Κι αστικά σαν την ομίχλη αναδύθηκε από τα βάθη της πλάτιας θάλασσας. Ως φα το δάκρυ χέων του δέκλειε πότνια μύτηρ Λιμένη εν πένθεσιν αλός, παρά πατρί γέροντι, καρπαλίμος δανέδι, πολύς αλός ή το μίχλι. Για την αιχμαλωσία της Θέτιδος από τον Πηλαία έχω μιλήσει αλλού. Παραθέτω το ποίημα. Θέτης, θέτης, αυτή που τίθεται, ίσως. Πάντα αυτή που θέτει. Όπως γνωρίζουμε ακόμα αυτή που αρνήθηκε να τεθεί, στον άντρα να παραδοθεί, γενόμενη, φωτιά, άνεμος, νερό, δέντρο, όρνηθα, τύρι, γενόμενη, λιοντάρι, φίδι, σουπιά, ώσπου κάποτε, στο ακροτήριο Σιπιάς, ο θνητός την έθεσε γερά κρατώντας, με σταθερή λαβή τη λία κατέκτησε και την έφαγε μέσα στον έρωτα. Άφησε μόνο το λευκό κόκαλό της, το κόκαλο της σουπιάς στην παραλία. Η Θέτης δεν είναι πια εκεί. Φυσά μία ντουντούκα από τα βάθη της θάλασσας. Ένα χωνί, ένα μεγάλο κοχύλι αντυχεί τα λόγια που λένε. Παρόλα τα μελάνια που αμόλυσα, ο άντρας με καταβρόχθησε. Εγώ θεά, αυτός θνητός. Ο πολεμιστής πάντοτε επιστρέφει νεκρός. 14. Επίσης, αλλού έχω μιλήσει για τη Θέτιδα και τις μανάδες αυτών που φεύγουν. Παραθέτω. «Πού είσαι, γέ μου», λέει η θεά Θέτης, «σε πότισα ροδόσταμο, σε μεγάλωσα μεγάλα με τη θεϊκή φωτιά μου, ολόκληρο σε βούτυξα μέσα της, ασπίδα στο σώμα σου όταν θα είσαι μακριά μου. Αλλά τα σώματα είναι σώματα, τα σώματα είναι ύλη και έπρεπε από τους αστραγάλους ανάποδα να σε κρατώ, από τις φτέρνες τις μικρές σου. Και αυτή, η αθάνατη της λαβής φραγίδα, έγινε το θνητό σημάδι σου, αγαπημένε. Ο τόπος της λαβής της μάνας, σημάδι του θανάτου. Έλεγε η γιαγιά και έπειτα η μαμά, να έχεις την ευχή μου, από μέσα από το βρακί μου. Α, δεν ήμουν κάποτε κι εγώ τζίτσικας, παιδί, πουλί, λουλούδι, με καρφωμένη την προβοσκίδα να ρουφώ δροσιά, να τραγουδώ μέσα στη ζέστη. Ξερός από το θέρος αγαϊδουράκαθο, υγρός από τον πόθο. Τι κουβαλάς μαζί όταν φεύγεις? Το σκοτάδι μου, το δικό μου κομμάτι σκοτάδι. Τι κουβαλάς μαζί όταν φεύγεις? Στο σώμα τα σημάδια. Το ξόρκι μου. Λησμονημένες πράξεις, λησμονημένες λέξεις, κομμάτια της παλιάς ζωής για να την έχεις φυλαχτό σαν ένα κόκκινο σταυρό. Για να μετακομίσω έπρεπε να μαζέψω τα πράγματα. Όμως, πιο πολύ πόναγε αυτό που είχε για χρόνια ξεχαστεί, γλιστρήσει ανάμεσα στα δάχτυλα σαν αέρας. Ό,τι εξεχάστη. Το κενό. Ό,τι δεν έγινε.
We'll take a minor break, 5 minutes or so, and we'll set up the stage so that Eleni and Phoebe can talk with us.
I thought it might be interesting for everyone if you could talk a little bit about the role of song for you and going between speaking, or as we say, reading one's poems and singing. And also maybe if that relates to the close association between poetry and popular song in Greece. You brought up Miki, I think, right? Mikis Theodorakis. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the role of singing for you, and maybe also something about poetry and music in Greek literature.
Thank you. It's a nice question because I didn't sing, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gorgeous.
So you know that perhaps modern Greece after the 60s, I think, till 2000 or even more, had these very famous and very important musicians and songwriters like Mikis Theodorakis and like Manos Hatzidakis, who were gorgeous and who were putting in music the most important pieces of contemporary Greek poetry that has been published at that moment. So this was during the dictatorship of the 60s till 70 something, and the discs were, it was vinyl discs at that period. They were forbidden to be at the house. I remember that in my house we were hiding the discs in several places.
You couldn't play the music.
No, you couldn't.
It's forbidden to play the music.
And it was something that was connecting all Greek people together and poetry to music at the same time. I mean, we knew poetry through the songs, through these songs, and it was very high quality poetry it was the more literate poetry. And from the other side, for me, there is much poetry inside the popular music, as you said. The most, the popular music of people that didn't belong to the society, that was rebellical music. This was a music of
The underground.
the underground,
Yeah.
really, of the underground. And but it had also verses, and the verses that I used to sing, I love them. They are pure poetry of the very simplest kind. So we have these two poles in contemporary Greece: the elaborate literary poetry, which is put in music, and the other one that is also very, very, very good poetry, but it's sung by everybody. This used to be when I was small, till when I grew up. So I think it inhabited me. And from the other point of view, because I did these classics, I have this classical background studies, my PhDs in ancient Greece. I had this, I had followed this anthropological kind of reading of ancient Greek poetry that was done by the School of Paris in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And these people said that, you know, you don't have to see ancient Greek poetry as something elevated and made by, and be something that has not a relationship to community. And they explained that all these songs, all this poetry that we read as poetry, as something that is written and is not sung, that it used to be sung, and there was no poetry that was not sung or was not recitated with rhythm. So you have either Homer, who was recitating, it was a popular poetry also, traditional poetry going by generation to the other generation, and was done orally in public. And it had the rhythm and meter. So that was the one thing. And the other was the lyric poetry, who was also music. And it was performed in common gatherings. So that's my, I still have this theme in mind, and I think that I would love to have music in my poetry.
It's fantastic. It's so interesting to hear you talk about growing up, right, and not being able to play this music in the dictatorship, and then, as you say, like these poems, what we think of as literary poems on the page, right, turn it, all are simultaneously popular songs that are also songs of resistance. And so it's just interesting to be reminded that that is, right, that you're growing up in that environment, right, where song is, it's playing an even more profound role because of the conditions, right, in society and because of the dictatorship. So I mean, for me, it puts an even more profound frame or more interesting frame around what is at stake. Right? What is at stake in singing and, being transformed, or how one, how Idon, right, the mother who turns into a nightingale, gets the power to sing because of this grief. Right? So hearing or being reminded of your biography, right, I read it, in even a deeper way. I wonder if we could go back to Thetis. Right?
We're back with Canon Live. This time we're featuring our creator kits for capturing high-quality stills.
Thanks. Thetis, the sea goddess, right, who's Protean, who can change shape, and Proteus tells the mortal Helios to hold her fast so she can't keep changing on him, right? And I was just, going back through your work, I was just thinking, like, there's so many women figures, of course, in mythology, right? A lot of women get turned into trees, plants, right? Like, they're usually running from Apollo, right? And they get turned into, like a laurel tree. Or, so we have these, women where transformation or shape-shifting is like a way to escape from the patriarchal. But sometimes those forms are also imposed on them.
But you have seen her. I mean, the video showed the cuttlefish was...
The cuttlefish, yeah.
It was changing, did you see that? It was changing
and that's
forms.
That's Thetis. The cuttlefish is
yes,
Thetis, is one of her forms.
Yeah.
So you're saying she still has the power. She's still shape-shifting. Nobody is holding her down. No, that's been really fascinating for me because of you draw out the meaning of her name, and there is a theory that the etymology of Thetis is about establishing, or like in a political sense, and foundation. And but some of the lines that you read from Thetis and Ivan, the book, you say, when you carry a child in your belly, you carry the whole world. And could you talk a little bit about Thetis? Thetis is also the mother of Achilles, the great warrior of the Iliad, and why she commissions the shield, the famous shield, for him.
So the poem speaks about that, the first poem I read, and it says that even if she's a mother who is an immortal mother, she's a goddess, she cannot die.
Right.
She has a son that, because he's the son of a mortal, is a mortal, even if he's so strong. So in the Iliad, if you have time, please read the Iliad. It's a poem that is fantastic, and you can see all these things. You can see, for example, how Achilles, who is the most powerful of all the warriors, when he learns about the death of his friend Patroclus, he cries, and while he cries, she hears him from the depths of the sea, and she comes out from the sea, and she says, excuse me for repeating the story, and she said, what do you want? What can I do for you? What happened? And he says, "No, you can do anything. It's the worst thing that could happen. My friend died, etc. And I'm going to go back to the battle," he said. And she knows that when he goes back to the battle, he will be dead. That's the final decision. And she says to him that, you know that if you go back, that means that you will die finally. And he says, "I don't mind, I will do it." So she says, "Okay, wait for a minute because you don't have your armor." The armor was where it was Patroclus who wears the armor, and I will bring you a new one. So she goes to Zeus, whom she was supposed to marry before. You know that.
No.
Okay. Yes. And they said that if you marry him, the son that you have will kill Zeus. So that's why they
The
make
son
her.
will kill the father.
Yes. So that's why they make her marry the mortal person. And she goes to Zeus and she begs him to stop the battle until the moment Hephaestus will make a new armor for her son. So this armor is like a false protection. I mean, she knows very well that he will die, but she wants him to have this whole thing on him, which makes him, I don't know how many things you can say about that. It makes him different in a way. It is her protection on her body, even if this protection doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And this protection has a part that is the shield, which is the first text we have where you have the description of a work of art in poetry. So it's the first emphasis. Yes. And this shield has the whole word on it. So it's something that he puts on in front of him, and it has the whole cosmos. It has the rivers, the whole earth, the villages, and people that are making trials. It's the whole world with inside war and inside peace, and perhaps it protects him, but it doesn't protect his
one.
Yes,
his Achilles tendon.
Yeah. So it's for you. You think? What did you say? It's
Well, I was picking up in your poem that you have the analogy.
yes.
I think that he actually says this. I think in your poem that that the shield which contains the whole world will now be his protection, just the way my belly.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I was saying to Susan, like, could anybody but you see that the mother's belly, right,
Mm-hmm.
carrying her child, carrying the whole world, that it comes before the shield. The shield is some
You mean
is
some
like a double.
repetition.
It's like a double, or it's a man-made, or God, Hephaestus, God-made.
The artisan.
It's an what I'm saying is an artificial,
yes.
right? It's an emblem of artifice. It's the first ekphrasis, but it's the artificial version
Mm-hmm.
of the mother's belly,
Mm-hmm.
which already Thetis is the creator in some
Mm-hmm.
versions.
Yes.
Anyway, I was just so struck by that, and that
Thank you. I like what you're saying.
But you said it.
I don't know.
It's in your poem.
Okay.
The goddess says it. Anyway, I love that, and the shield has the whole world in it, but the belt, and you know what it's also like. This is a little bit more esoteric, but it's like the icon in the Greek church of I platitera ton uranon, right? So it's kind of like in the back. The church, it's not on the ceiling, because that's
It's on the back of the church?
It's in the back. I think it's the Virgin Mary, and she's depicted where there's the sky above her and the stars, and the idea is it's a paradox, because she has the Son of God, right? One is the three are one in her belly. but so how, if nothing's been created yet, right, how is she, so she kind of emerges as the creator? Anyway, it reminded me of that. The name of this particular incarnation of Mary is Wider Than the Heavens. La Terra. Yeah. And so that, it reminds me of that like, Thetis has the whole world. She's the creator in her belly. It's replicated on the shield.
But the one is more, I think that the Virgin Mary is more an organ of patriarchy, if you like.
Well, of course, but we're trying to reclaim,
Because Jesus,
I see you as doing that. You're
if
bringing
you
out.
see Jesus himself, he's he's a victim of it.
Yeah, well, that's another story.
Yeah.
I mean, but it does. But what you're saying does speak to this, this double edge. I think is so fascinating in your work of like this metamorphosis as a kind of power of the hunted, a power of women, a power of scapegoats, right? And yet it can also, it can bind you and be, it's also about power, being under power. So it has this double edge.
Yes, because for example, this word metis that is used in ancient Greek, and it means the cunning intelligence in this word. This was for the use of the people that didn't have, the powerless people. And this force, a big part of it had this aspect of metamorphosis, because you had to be transformed in order to, for example, escape when they were chasing you, or for the animals in the sea. The cuttlefish was doing that in order to, or the octopuses. So they had this power of metamorphosis in order to escape.
And it's an intelligence, and
Yes,
it's embodied.
it's an intelligence, yes, an embodied intelligence.
So it's metis is like, it's like being a trickster,
yes,
really,
exactly.
right? And it's about Odysseus, and
yes,
cunning, and getting. They're always being a solution, right? They're always being a way
a
out.
way to go out.
Yeah. That makes me think of your swimming song. If you read Phoebe's book Homerica, there's a great poem. Penelope. It's 1, 2, I can't remember.
I don't remember.
But anyway, it's this. You have to. Maybe it's online video, but it's a swimming song, and it's like the best post-breakup song ever, right?
Yes.
And the solution is in the swimming. Like the way to get out of it is to swim. Thank you. Let's open it up to people's questions, comments.
Yeah, and because we don't have a mic for the audience, could you sort of restate the question?
No,
once
we
we
can
ask.
keep
Oh,
that,
sure.
no?
Okay, yeah, sure, of course.
Yeah. Susan, you have something?
I'm working on it.
I was wondering, Phoebe, if you could talk a little bit, the shield came up and all that, but the mask that you used today, to speak behind. Could you talk a little bit about that and your thoughts around that?
So, this.
Yes.
So this is how do you say, the women put
The apron.
Apron, yes. So this is an apron, and it's made by these people that are practicing transhumans, and like the blacks, Sarakatani. I think this is from Sarakatani, and it's the main characteristic of women. They are putting it here, so it is on the belly, and so. One thing is that it has a symbolism, a female symbolism, this thing, but also a symbolism that has to do with goat and goat people and nomadic life. They were nomads, these people. But to put in front of my face, this was something I started when I was doing the America thing, and I think it had to do with the question of who is speaking, and if the one who is speaking cannot be herself and could be replaced with something else that is not herself. I mean, if you, in a way, if you hide your face, you hide the person who is speaking, and the voice can be lended to somebody else who is speaking through you, in a way. And Socrates, if you read Phaedrus, he uses this trick. He covers his head when he wants to say something that is not true.
Mm-hmm.
So he covers his head and he says, okay, I will do that now. I will make this speech that I don't believe in it. And this speech was saying that love is not something good for you. If you have a relationship, it's better not to have love in the relationship. And then something happens, and he says, now that I'm going to say the true speech, I can uncover my head. So now that I'm going to say these things that I believe. So it's something like a playing between with the question whether is there something that is true when we speak? Is our voice ours? What does it mean that the voice is not ours and it belongs to others? So it is a play on this for me. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like one of the ways in which the voice is not ours but belongs to others is just that it's not a voice unless it's heard in some sense.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that in the listening,
Mm-hmm.
it becomes
Yes.
ours
Yes. Ah.
and gets multiplied
Mm-hmm.
in that
Mm-hmm.
way.
And I did this at that scene where I am, because the whole video doesn't have myself on it. I mean, it's the animals, the cuttlefish, the birth of the cuttlefish. If you don't understand what happened, it was the small cuttlefish that was going out, etc. And then I put it when I am on screen. And this was the best reading performance I have done.
To the goats?
Yeah, really. I mean, I understood that they were very sensitive to everything. So I had to move very slowly. This thing that I was holding the aegis, it makes a lot of noise because
the parchment.
the parchment, and they got afraid, and every time I was trying to do something, they went away. So I had to adapt myself to their kind of listening, and then they listened. So it was really, yeah, I love that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, following up on listening,
Mm-hmm.
so we are hopefully in this room listening, and I'm wondering where else of the goats listened, and where else do you think of your work as being listened to, as landing, and so maybe that has something to do with you as a poet in a world of contemporary Greek poets, or where does your work land? How do you see it circulating and coming back to you, or does it?
I don't know. I don't know. Really, I can understand when something is alive, as here, if it's heard or listened to. But otherwise, I cannot answer what you ask.
Well, let me get ridiculously concrete.
Yes, please. Because
So, for example, we have a lot of assumptions about how poetry is treated in public space.
Mhm.
We have poetry readings, and people generally read for 20 or 30 or 40 minutes and then stop. But I've seen many other kinds of public presentations of poetry in Greece.
Mhm.
And so do you feel like you live in a culture of a place where readings happen in public venues?
Mhm.
Or people ask you to come and, obviously in the US people ask you to come and read your work. Does that
Mhm.
happen in Greece? And who is inviting you for
Oh,
those, if so?
usually there are poets again. I mean, there are poetic meetings. When I started reading in public, in Greece, there was no public reading. This happened in about 2000. We were a bunch of people that were meeting in a bar in Athens, and it was there that we started reading aloud.
To each other?
Yes, to each other, and then we made this public. Till then, it was a period where poetry was almost dead and nobody was reading in public. And I think then it was for me the opportunity to learn to read. I mean, I was not reading before, and we had these informal meetings where we were reading, and we were inviting our friends, and that was all. But little by little, this has been developed the last years, and I think it had also to do with the crisis and the economic crisis and the ways people tried to be together. And especially after COVID, it started being more and more vivid. I mean, after COVID, it was the second, let's say, wave of this. People young people wanted to be together. They could be together in open places that they weren't before. And in an informal way, in a cheaper way, they would buy the beer somewhere and go out and meet. And now there are a lot of young people that are writing poetry in Greece, something that was not before. It was not. No. So yes, I read there if I am invited or something, or in artistic things also. I mean exhibitions, things like that, where they call people to read something that didn't exist before. It didn't exist. I mean, after mixed rights that I was saying before, singing poetry. After that, for some 10 or 20 years perhaps, nothing happened. It was something like the end of poetry and singing poetry, and then it came back again. Yeah. So, yes.
Very
And we are doing events now that several people are reading together. A lot of them happen. Here, I think here is more than in Greece. Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's a lot, yes.
Yeah, there's a lot.
That's why one of the reasons I asked, it's such a totally different kind of public world
Yes.
for poetry.
Yes, yes.
And has been for pretty long.
Yes, here it's.
Yeah. Even in Greece, I think there are only very recently creative writing programs where we're here and we're in one now. They're everywhere.
Yes.
Is that correct?
No, in Greece I think we have one creative writing program, perhaps. I'm teaching in my the architecture school creative writing, but there is another one I think in an art school, and that's all in the whole. Yes. So it's different. We didn't have this kind of tradition.
So there's a professionalization of poetry here that isn't in Greece in the same way.
I don't think it is only a professionalization. I think it's a kind of for many years in Greece, the poets were persons that you were making fun of.
That
Yeah.
happens here too.
Yeah. It was. I mean, in the most popular movies, there is a poet who is Hopitis fanfaras. Fanfara, I don't know if you have the word. He's the crazy person who has the hair like that. Yeah. So.
Coming from someone from Greece, and most of the poetry and literature that has to do with Greek alludes to the classics, and I just want to know why you think it's so powerful and why most of the literature alludes to that.
Nice question, thank you. That's, I think, something that has to do with me, and also has to do with Greek culture, but in another way. I mean, for a big part, for the state and for Greek education, ancient Greek culture is the way to trace a relationship to the past and feel that this country is a nation that has to do with that. So the whole conception of the Greek nation is has been tied after the birth, let's say, of the Greek state, has been tied to ancient Greece. And it's a thing that also the Europeans imposed to Greek people, to modern Greece. So I don't have, and I don't want at all to be identified with this part of use of ancient Greek culture, because it is the nationalistic one and the fundamentalistic one. And the fascist, the Nazi party in Greece, the Golden Dawn, it's a party who is based on the symbols of ancient Greece. They use Leonidas, they use...
They warp them.
Yeah. But me, I think that for me the myth is a way to speak about contemporary things. And I read it in a personal way from one part, and from the other, I think it makes me think, because of the classical background I have as studies, upon certain themes that have to do with poetry and with landscape that I'm very interested to, and with sound. So I find these bits and parts that are inside ancient Greek poetry, and I am, incorporating in my work, but I don't want it to be identified with a kind of conception of Greece as the ancient Greek thing, etc. No.
That's perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
It's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I feel like Greeks are living people, and their literature is continuous, right? Because so often, from a European point of view, or Greece stands in, as you say, for the past and for the origins of Europe, and that's debatable. And there's colonialism at work there, and so I mean it's a great question, and also great to hear you, because so many Greek poets and so many poets in general, right, are working with the mythology and with classical literature. But for me, there's always been something very, very different about how you work with the myths and the figures and the language. Part of it is your training as a philologist, but there's something for me where you're it's like it's radical, because you're going into like the physical forms of it and the way that that it's still in the landscape, and it's still in the culture, and it's still, right?
Yes.
So I mean, the shepherds with their goats, and the different kinds of rhapsody, and the weaving, and the hair and the skin. It's like you can see. It's not a false, the modern Greeks are just like, it's not a false continuity, but it's something that's very real about embodied life and practice. Right? So for me, how Phoebe handles these myths and how you write about them it's somatic, it's sensuous, And it's something that kind of goes away from the sense of elitism or of, a kind of shorthand for a glorious past or to authorize yourself as a nation. That makes sense. It's just something very, very different, in your work about how the myths live and how you translate them and give them life. And
as you said, it's the landscape, it's the animals, it's the way the landscape still exists in Greece it's the same landscape. So the cicadas are there, even if Plato was using them. For me, it's the sound of the summer, for example.
Right, it's the same. The sound is the same sound.
Yes, it's the same sound, and it's summer. When you don't hear it, it's not summer. Then it comes and you have summer inside. So it's something that goes through the ages, and perhaps it's the living material of the landscape.
That's what that it's always material.
Yeah.
It's like, and in some way, that gets at the speaking the truth or not speaking the truth, right? Because there is this, that the poetic and the spoken and the thought and abstract is always at once material, physical. It's the skin, it's the earth, it's the soil. And I think that you bring out that double, that double quality or that fully embodied quality, in a unique way, extraordinary way. Other questions, comments?
Is there a lot of diversity in Greece?
Excuse me?
Diversity?
Diversity?
A lot of cultures?
Like ethnic diversity?
No. That's the question. That's exactly the problem. After the making of the Greek state, little by little they made disappear the different cultures that were there. It's a Balkanic country, and it was part of the Ottoman Empire. So inside the Greek, let's say, territory, there were a lot of cultures and people, and they were Ottoman people, Jewish people, Albanians, Slavs, so different various languages, and they started making this disappear, the state, and this continued till now. Now we have very, very small minorities from this past. But now, there are all the immigrants that come from Asia and from the countries that they are refugees. And all these refugees are various cultures that come back again in Greece. And this is a very good new thing that, of course, the Greek state does not want to accept. There is a very big issue on whether we have to host the people or make them Greek and give them the nationality. The state doesn't want to do that. So it's a very big issue. But because Greece, really, your question is interesting, thank you. Because Greece is at that very crucial point that it's between Asia and Europe and Africa and Europe again, it has been always a point of meeting of different cultures and different people. It couldn't be something else than that. So even that's the story of the geographical place. Even if somebody or the power or the state power wants to get rid of the values of the diversity, it comes back again.
This is one of the things that's so moving for me about your performance installation, Nomos, the land song, which is also part of your book, Chimera, which will be in English soon, I think, right? But this, so you started off, saying about the diversity that was kind of disappeared, right, under the the Greek identity, right? So the Vlachs, the Sarakatsani, the Albanians, right? And so the shepherds that you follow doing that work are Vlachs, and they speak a different language than Greek. They speak a language that is endangered.
It's
right?
really endangered.
Yeah, but there are very few speakers. So,
I think that now is the last generations that speak.
Yeah, and I don't know if people know about endangered languages, but language preservation is a huge part of cultural survival, cultural preservation, and so that is in that is in your nomos, but also as and I hope that people will watch the video. There's a video of you performing in New York City in 2016. Hope people will check it out. But as the performance goes on, we also realize that the ones who are nomadic, who are moving over the land, are also all of the migrants, right? They're the migrants, the refugees, and that is one of the things that's so beautiful to me about that, because this idea of the right to the land, whether to feed your flocks, right, and have your sheep and goats, or to be able to move across the land, or to find a new home, right, or to be safe. For me, you're really remaking, when we talk about ecology and the ecos, if you really remake that for me, that it's like we all come from the earth, and all beings, whether they're goats, whether they're human migrants, right, should have the right to move freely.
Yes, that's something that is, I think today in the whole globe is something that is under big danger, and it's one of the most important things to fight for. Yeah. The right to the land, the right to circulate, the right to be outside borders, and and that's the same for people and the animals. Now we live in a period where we see problems that happen to the animals that we couldn't understand before, and we can see that they are common with people. I mean, they can share these problems. Huh?
Yeah, and I was earlier when I was thinking about your work, I was thinking about how animals have morality, as they say. Franz de Waal, the scientist who works with primates. But yes, anyway, so the research that they've done, animals have emotions, right? And so they've done studies where altruism, fairness, compassion. You can observe these. So I was thinking earlier that in your work there are so many. It's like animals are. It's like thought and compassion and altruism and freedom, like our knowledge of these is animal. Our knowledge of these is animal. I feel like your work, that's one of the things it says to me.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
You talked about earlier with your first phone, you said you used the numbers to separate language, ideas, and incorporate new voices and perspective. I was just wondering about the inspiration behind that, and how you developed it, and when you kind of thought oh, this works.
Oh. Okay. I think it's my last passion. I mean, it's my last technique, let's say, to write. At a certain point, and with this book, Chimera, but also before, with the previous book I had, I did this kind of assemblage of texts and various texts that were not only mine, but were texts that I have read, fragments that I heard, things that I found in the internet, lexicological things from the dictionary, what else? Things that I heard somewhere outside, oral things that I incorporated, and I was making this assemblage, which was more like a collage. I mean, I was as if you cut the things and you put them. And then at that point, and it started with Fetis and I know poem that was in the video. That's when I started with this 1, 2, 3. I wanted to keep the flow, and I said to myself, oh, you know, you don't have to be so accurate. I mean, to use the exact fragments and the exact phrases and the exact, you can leave your imagination together with your memory and keep the pace. So I started doing that 1, 2, 3, and I saw that it was more easy for me, and at the same time it gave me freedom. It gave me a freedom that I needed in order to open the limits of what is the poem, and in order to make a poem that can be continued, to be continued. It kept the pace of the continuation of the material. I mean, a certain fluidity. So the number cuts the fluidity from one part, because you say one and you don't, you cut with the numbers, but it has for me a kind of power to say the number and to write the number.
Like a momentum.
Yes,
Giving
yes.
me momentum.
Yes, 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 yes. And I think that I have something with the numbers.
Mm.
I mean, this poem also with Penelope that you mentioned, it has inside numbers, and it is the heroine who swims, and she counts the swimming.
Do you want to read it for us? Do you have a copy here?
And perhaps
Only if you want to. It's such a great poem.
If I find it.
That was like a little demo.
Yeah, I love to hear. I thought the techniques worked so well. Hearing it, hearing the different voices and different ideas, and then cover it.
You liked it?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I am glad to hear that, because I love so much this method for me that yes, that you saw that and you heard it. It's important.
Yeah, I think it keeps the pace and keeps the listener involved the whole time, because they're constantly trying to keep track of the number and keep track of what's going on.
Ah, great, thank you. So if I find this book, say something else.
Does anybody? Well, we can bracket this if you can find it. The poem is just one of my favorites. I would love to hear it again. And but Phoebe had this book, Homerica. People, I don't know if a copy of this. Do you have a copy?
Yeah,
Can you bring us a
if you have
copy?
a copy, I can read it from the
Yeah,
back.
she can read it. So.
I remember
There you
it, but
go.
I'm not sure. I'll tell you. So that's the book. Okay, Homerica. And now I have to put my glasses on. Okay, I have glasses in order to see. Reading glasses. But I read it in Greek. And I don't understand anything.
But don't you have the English too?
I have the English, but I cannot read it the same way.
Do you want to read the Greek and then read the
And
English?
you read the English.
Or I can read the English? Or you can...
Okay. Penelope 1. I am addicted to you. Έχει πάθος με την πισίνα. Κάθε μέρα στην πισίνα, πάνω, κάτω, την ίδια διαδρομή, ξανά και ξανά. Η πισίνα την κρατά στη ζωή. Το κολύμπι στην πισίνα τη συντηρεί. Το συνεχές πηγενέλα, η ρυθμική αναπνοή, ο συντονισμός χεριών, ποδιών με το κεφάλι, μέσα, έξω στο νερό το κεφάλι, επαναλαμβανόμενα μπαίνει και βγαίνει, φυσά μέσα, ρουφά έξω τον αέρα. Οι παύσεις κάθε λίγο στο διάδρομο. Τα πλακάκια κάτω από την επιφάνεια, μέσα στο φως. Τα ξένα σώματα απειλητικά με σκουφιά και με πέδιλα, το νερό μες στο χλώριο, ο ουρανός πάνω από κυπαρίσια. Η πισίνα με κρατά στη ζωή. Το συνεχές τραγούδι. Το μέτρημα. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 15, 19 χτυπήματα περιστροφές. Το τραγούδι του μετρήματος, η επανάληψη απολυθώνει. Το τραγούδι της πισίνας με σώζει από τη γνώση πως δεν μ' αγαπά.
Penelope 1, I am addicted to you. She has a passion for the pool, each day in the pool, up and down, the same circuit again and again. The pool keeps her alive. Swimming in it sustains her. The continuous back and forth, the rhythmic breathing, synchronicity of the hands and legs with the head in, out of the water. The head repeatedly enters and leaves, blows inside, sucks in air outside, pauses a bit each time in the lane, tiles underneath the surface, under the light, the bodies of strangers menacing with caps and flippers, the water suffused with chlorine, the sky over cypress trees. The pool keeps me alive, the continual song, counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 15, 19 blows, rotations. The song of counting the repetition turns you to stone, yet the song of the pool saves me from the knowledge he does not love me.
Thank you.
The counting, you can't do this in English
No, you can't.
because
That's why I said I can't do it in English.
the count. I mean, because it's all monosyllab. Well, not
Yes.
all, but you know the for the first numbers. That poem puts me in a trance in the best way.
Thank you.
Anyway.
That's the counting.
some
The
more
counting puts you
counting,
in a trance, I think.
Yeah.
And the musicians use a lot the counting, I think. So the counting is something that
That's right. It has a
that's why we love it. Yes.
has a hypnotic effect.
Mm.
Is that poem going back to the myth of Penelope?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because Penelope's myth has this kind of thing that she waits for Odysseus to come back and he doesn't. And she has these persons that are called
The
the
suitors.
suitors,
Yeah.
yes.
The guys who are trying to get her.
And she says to them that I will marry one of you when I will finish my weaving thing.
Weaving the shroud
Yes.
for her father.
So she weaves it and she de-weaves it. I don't know.
Unweaves
She
it.
takes it
Unweaves
apart
it, yes.
each night. Yeah.
Each night in order not to marry. So the counting is a reference to the weaving because when somebody weaves, she has to count because she has to count where to put the, I don't know how do you call it, but she has to count. So it's the reminiscence of this counting and of her waiting and not having the man, let's say. The love.
Swimming echoes that.
Yes.
The way the
And you
verses
have the same
happens,
thing
too.
inside the lanes of the pool. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the strophe.
Yeah.
Strophe.
Mhm.
The turn at the end, the
And,
somersault.
and
at
it's
the
the
end of
strophe of the poem. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it has allusions to the making of the poem, the lines of the pool, and the lines of the weaving in a way.
Mhm.
Thank you for the explanation, too.
Maybe we're done.
Okay.
Thank you.